Hi everyone, this is a constructive feedback video for a drawing done by artist Ulises Estrada. Let's just dive right into the feedback. You can see here I'm starting just by changing some of the size and sometimes shape of some of the body parts to make them more properly aligned with each other in general symmetry and also proportions. One pec was too short compared to the other, and the arms were considerably too short in general for proportions that tend to be used for superheroes. The wrist should make it down to the crotch line, but even though Wolverine is a short character, they should have come much closer to the crotch line than the drawing originally had. So you can see here I'm lengthening, scaling, and repositioning the arms and then rotating the wrists a bit to make the arm pose a little stronger. It can look a little bit weak if the forearms are angling out, but then the wrists angle back in. It can look a little weird and sort of wobbly, so we're fixing that. And then these are the latissimus dorsi muscles, which are also called the cobra hood. It's what gives a muscular man a very powerful, broad-shouldered, broad-backed appearance. And as you can see there, I continue to move the arms out to widen his shoulder span. Wolverine is specifically supposed to be a short and fairly thick and clearly muscular character, so I'm bringing the proportions back in line with such a character. Aside from general proportions, the thing that ended up needing the most work was the entire pelvis area and how the external obliques and abdomen go down into the pelvis and the size of the pelvis. So for this particular artist, I would especially recommend studying from both artistic anatomy books and from actual reference photos, or even better, live models. We're going to zoom in here to the head. There was a perspective issue with the angle the teeth were going on versus the angle of these things that stick out on the side of Wolverine's head. They're supposed to be the same height on either side, obviously. So I'm going to work on that, and also the basically curve of the dental structure of his teeth is too narrow. So I'm going to widen that and continue to fix the angle so the perspective on the head is better. And I'm going to also do that with the lower teeth. And then another important thing I'm going to do soon is increase the height of that entire part of his face, specifically to give him a more human-sized nose. His nose was incredibly short, so I just made that a bit more like normal human proportions. Even as Wolverine was often drawn with a relatively short nose, that was just too extreme. And then here I'm just finally tweaking the perspective just a little bit more to get that much more in line with an actual vanishing point. And now I'm going to start addressing the fact that the actual pelvic bowl is much too short and the abdomen is a bit too long. So I'm carefully cutting out bits of the abdomen and the pelvis so I can keep raising up the pelvis to get the belt line where it belongs and give that actual pelvic bowl of his body the room that it needs to actually match human anatomy. And then, as you can see, I'm raising up that back leg, and I'm going to continue to make more adjustments to give that pelvic bowl and his crotch region more three-dimensional form. And now I'm just bringing down the top of that thigh to be a little bit more in its proper place for the pelvis. And this is an extremely common problem where so many artists are so worried about the center line of the chest that they forget to give the chest depth. It protrudes. You know the expression barrel-chested to mean a strong, muscular man with a chest that protrudes. And very often this will create an almost concaved appearance, which is the exact opposite of what you want when you want to create the illusion of a three-dimensional shape, and especially of a man's very strong chest. So you can see I'm using this mesh deforming tool in Clip Studio Paint to give the chest the dimensionality and make it protrude like it actually should have. And as things progress, I can just continue making more and more subtle changes, because once the big things are fixed, you can start to see the smaller problems that are still relevant and should still be fixed before moving on to the inking stage of a comic book illustration. And as you're going to see, soon I'm going to start flipping the entire image frequently, because we all have these weird biases that slant us in perspective and warp things one way or the other. And by looking at your art in the mirror or flipping it if it's digital, you get to see where these problems are. And always keep the particular character and his attributes in mind. Wolverine is a very short character, and this head, as it was very small, which is typical for making a character look very tall, so I made his head a bit bigger. So again, I'm just going to keep moving around and looking for things that still could use a bit more three-dimensionality or a little proportional shifting, usually making it a little bit bigger and help giving the figure more dimension. And again, this pec was still a little bit too flat and a little bit too short compared to the other one. And at this point, the character's proportions are much better, but he still feels too tall and his torso a bit too long for me. So I'm just going to cut out this entire section so I can further nudge down and shorten his abdomen just a little bit more, which I think really helped. And you'll see I just keep making more and more subtle refinements as things get closer and closer to the way they should be. And just here I'm tweaking more of the thighs as they go into the pelvis, and here making the forearm up toward the elbow area was definitely a little too fat and round, and over here it was a little too puffy. So we're just getting the anatomy a little bit better and more in proportion with each other as we go. And this hand needs quite a bit of work, but I'm going to get back into that later, because first I make some alterations to the trapezius muscle, which needs a bit of work also. It was a little too sort of big and bunched up, and especially because I widened and brought out the shoulders, it needed to be brought in line with the new width of the shoulder span. And now I finally start flipping the image so I can really start to see the last remaining issues with the sort of three-dimensional shape and the overall proportions. And I just continue to use the mesh deforming, or cage mesh deforming it might be called, I don't remember, to just continue to give more depth and dimensionality to the figure and make sure everything is in proper perspective. And for the final suggested edits, I needed to grab a pencil tool and start to fix things up a little bit so we could see more clearly what's going on. One of the most important anatomical issues is right here. These are called the serratus anterior muscles. People often mistake them for ribs, and they look really cool when you get them right, and it's really worth studying. Way too many artists try to fake what's going on in that side of the ribs and the armpit. It's really worth it to study how those muscles actually work and sort of interweave and lock into the side of the rib cage. Your art will just look so much better for spending the time to learn that. So aside from that, I'm just making relatively small tweaks, thickening the line and darkening it just so I can see exactly how the final form should be looking. And soon you're going to see I'm going to try to address this hand, this making a visible thumb, and trying to fix the overall perspective of the hand as it relates to the position of the forearm, which was a little bit tricky, but eventually I get to a relatively good state for it. I undid my first attempt, but then give it another shot. And it's really important. If you're drawing, odds are you have hands. And the cool thing is, no matter how muscular or skinny or fat you might be, hands tend to very mostly look the same between everyone. So you can use your own hands as models, and it's a really good idea when you're dealing with a tricky pose or perspective to just use your cell phone or some kind of camera you can find, or a mirror, or someone else's hand, and look and try to figure out how to fix what's going on in perspective or anatomy with the hand that you're trying to draw. So again, just flipping the image back and forth to see if there are any other issues that I can find and fix. But it's definitely getting close now, and now I'm just doing some really nitpicky cut and paste style erasing to get rid of lines that shouldn't be there or that were too thick or got too fuzzy. And that's as far as I'm going to take this one. The original drawing, here it is, had a lot of potential, a lot of nice artwork and style to it, but there were some definite underlying anatomy and proportional issues that should have been addressed first before working on all that nice line art, which is a very common problem. Thanks very much for watching.
If you enjoy our content and want to keep up to date on our games, please leave a like and subscribe. Also, if you want to support our projects, consider becoming a patron. The link's in the description, and we'll see you soon.